the weight of 300 years pressed down on every corner of the hall. The assembly chamber of the United Earth Governance had been built to awe. Its ceiling arched 40 meters above the floor, a transparent dome through which the pale amber light of Kepler 442, their adopted sun, fell in long diagonal shafts. Delegates from every continent sat in concentric rings around the central dais, their faces turned upward as if in prayer, though none of them were praying. They were watching the ship. It hung in low orbit, visible to the naked eye from anywhere on Earth's surface. No weapons array that humanity possessed could read its dimensions accurately. The sensors kept returning different numbers, as though the vessel refused to be measured. It was dark in the way that deep water is dark, not an absence of light but a presence of something that swallowed it. The Moran ship had arrived 11 hours ago without a signal, without a hail, without the courtesy of announcement. It had simply appeared, the way a creditor appears at a door you have long stopped watching. Dania Osei stood at the window behind the chamber's upper gallery and looked at it. She had been president of the United Earth Governance for 14 months. She had won on a platform of infrastructural reform, agricultural equity across the outer settlements, and a renegotiation of tariff agreements with the Valesi Compact. She had studied law. She had practiced environmental arbitration for 11 years before entering politics. She had prepared, in her careful and methodical way, for almost every crisis that a planetary government might face. She had not prepared for this. "They've sent a communication capsule," said Joseph Barak, her chief of staff. He was a compact man with silver-streaked hair and the permanent expression of someone reading bad news in a foreign language. He held a data slate against his chest as if shielding it from her. "It arrived at the surface relay station 40 minutes ago. The translation is incomplete. The Moran linguistic protocols haven't been actively used in over 2 centuries. Our systems are reconstructing from archived records." "How incomplete?" "The structure is clear. The meaning is clear. The tone is," he paused, "debated." Dania turned from the window. "Show me." He handed her the slate. She read it twice. The message was short, which made it worse. "The account has matured. We come to receive what was promised. One favor, unconstrained in scope, to be rendered within 30 of your rotational cycles. We are patient. We have always been patient. We ask only that you remember what patience cost us, and what generosity cost us more." She set the slate down on the window ledge and looked at the ship again. Somewhere below her, in the chamber, 412 delegates were waiting for her to come down and tell them what to do. The Secretary-General of the Galactic Union had already sent 3 encrypted messages in the past hour. The Valesi ambassador had formally requested an emergency bilateral meeting. 2 of the outer settlement governors had gone off-network entirely, which meant they were either panicking or preparing, and she did not yet know which was worse. "Get me Director Solis," she said. "And find whoever is still alive from the original treaty archive team. There has to be someone. The treaty was signed 300 years ago, Madam President. Then find their grandchildren." The office of Mirela Solis, director of the Office of Interstellar Relations, occupied a building that had once been a museum. This was not accidental. When the United Earth Governance had been restructuring its diplomatic infrastructure 40 years ago, someone with a sense of irony had converted the Museum of the Great Relocation into the headquarters of the body responsible for managing Earth's relationships with the rest of the galaxy. The original exhibits were still there, behind glass in the lower corridors: photographs of a dying sun, models of the gravitational tethers the Moran had used, the faces of the 10 billion people who had stood on Earth's surface on the day the planet moved and watched their old sky go dark forever. Solis was 63 years old, had served 4 presidents, and had negotiated the Valesi fishing rights dispute, the Chorus Confederation data sovereignty accords, and the extraordinarily delicate situation 3 years ago when a human mining crew had accidentally demolished what turned out to be a Hethasai ancestral monument. She did not panic easily. She was, when Dania arrived, doing something that looked very much like controlled panic. "The original treaty language," she said, without preamble, spreading documents across the long table in her conference room, "is in Proto-Moran, Standard Old Galactic, and a dialect of pre-unification Mandarin that no one has spoken natively in 250 years. The certified translation that was filed with the Galactic Union uses a simplified common tongue rendering that was standard at the time but has since been identified as, and I am quoting the academic literature here, substantially imprecise in its treatment of conditional obligation clauses. Meaning we're not entirely sure what we agreed to." Solis looked up. The phrase that's been translated as "one favor, unconstrained in scope," the original Moran term is closer to something like "one act of alignment." Which could mean a favor. Or it could mean something more specific. Something ideological. Dania pulled out a chair and sat down. What does an act of alignment mean to the Moran? That's the problem. 300 years ago, when the treaty was signed, humanity knew almost nothing about Moran culture or philosophy. We were dying. The sun was expanding anomalously. Every model we had showed a premature helium flash, 40 to 60 years out, possibly less. The Moran appeared, offered to move the planet, and named their price. Our ancestors signed. And in 300 years, no one has clarified the terms. Solis sat down across from her. For a moment she said nothing, and in that silence Dania heard the particular frequency of a truth that someone has been sitting on for a long time. There were attempts, Solis said carefully. In the first century after the relocation, there were 3 diplomatic missions to Moran space. The first 2 received no response. The third was received, acknowledged, and told, politely, by all accounts, that the account would be settled in the Moran's own time and that further inquiry was unnecessary. And after that, people stopped asking. 100 years became 200. The relocation became history, and then mythology. The debt became something people knew about the way they know about ancient treaties, technically real, functionally abstract. She paused. Until this morning. Dania looked at the documents on the table. Centuries of paper and data, the accumulated record of a promise a species had made in desperation and then quietly tried to forget. What do we know about what they want? She asked. Solis folded her hands. The communication capsule contained more than the public message. There was a secondary packet, encrypted in a key that took our systems 6 hours to crack. It contained a summary of what the Moran intend to call in. She did not continue immediately. Director. They want us to help them move a planet. The word settled in the room like something very heavy set down very carefully. Whose planet? Dania asked. Verith 4. It is the 6th largest inhabited world in the Galactic Union. Home to approximately 4 billion Hethasai. The name landed in Dania's chest like a stone through ice. The Hethasai were not an abstraction. They were humanity's oldest allies in the galactic community, the first species to formally welcome Earth into the Galactic Union after the relocation, the civilization that had served as cultural translators and diplomatic sponsors for 2 generations of human diplomats. Every schoolchild on Earth knew about the Hethasai, about their vast communal memory archives, their 7-phase life cycle, their art that existed simultaneously as music and mathematics. The ambassador currently serving in New Accra, a being called Thessaly of the 7th Coherence, had been a personal friend of 2 previous Earth presidents. The Moran want to move a Hethasai planet, Dania said. Without the Hethasai's consent, Solis said. And specifically in a direction that would remove Verith 4 from Galactic Union jurisdiction and place it within Moran's sovereign space. That's an act of war. Yes. The Galactic Union Charter is explicit. Involuntary displacement of a member civilization's homeworld is classified as an act of supreme aggression. The last time it happened, 400 years ago, before humanity had even left its original solar system, it triggered a conflict that lasted 80 years and killed 12 billion beings. Dania stood up slowly. She walked to the window of Solis's office, which looked out over a courtyard where the old museum's garden had been maintained. Trees from Earth's original biome, transplanted carefully over 3 centuries, grew in soil that had been carried here in the holds of generation ships. An oak. A figure. A baobab, broad and ancient, its roots spreading beneath the paving stones. Why? She said. Why do they want to move a Hethasai planet? That, said Solis, is the question the secondary packet does not answer. The Galactic Union's permanent representative to Earth was an entity called the Chorus Concordance, not a being but a collective, a rotating diplomatic body drawn from 17 member civilizations. It met in a building near the coast, a structure designed to accommodate 17 different atmospheric preferences simultaneously, which meant it looked, from the outside, like someone had tried to combine a greenhouse, a submarine, and a cathedral. The representative who met with Dania the following morning was the Valesi segment of the Concordance, tall, bilaterally asymmetric, with 4 eyes arranged in a vertical line and a voice that arrived slightly before the movement of the speaking apparatus, a quality that humans found deeply unsettling and the Valesi considered a sign of good breeding. Its name, in common tongue approximation, was Archdelegate Shanvoris. It had been in this posting for 30 years and had developed the specific emotional flatness of someone who has witnessed too much history to be surprised by any particular piece of it. The Union's position, it said, is that Earth must refuse. They were sitting in a room calibrated for human comfort, which meant Shinvoris was operating at slightly reduced atmospheric pressure and occasional visible discomfort. Dania had offered to move the meeting to a neutral environment. The offer had been declined, she suspected, to establish a particular dynamic. The Union's position, she said, does not change the fact that we have a debt. You have a claimed debt. The Moran have presented a demand. Whether that demand constitutes a legitimate calling-in of a legitimate obligation is contested. Contested by whom? By the Union Legal Council. By 17 member civilizations. By the scholars who have reviewed the original treaty language. A pause. And, I would suggest, by the basic moral logic that no valid contract can obligate a party to commit a war crime. That's a position I'm sympathetic to, Dania said. I'm asking what it costs us to take it. Shinvoris was quiet for a moment. Dania had learned, in 14 months of dealing with non-human diplomats, that silence from a Valesi was not emptiness but calculation. They were beings who modeled consequences before speaking, who considered words too important to waste on unfinished thinking. If Earth refuses and the Moran accept the refusal, it said at last, the cost is minimal. Residual diplomatic friction. Perhaps some trade disruption along Moran-adjacent routes. The Union's unified refusal would isolate any Moran response. And if the Moran don't accept the refusal? Another silence, longer this time. The Moran, Shinvoris said carefully, are not a civilization that makes threats. In 4,000 years of recorded interaction with the galactic community, they have never threatened anyone. They have, on occasion, simply acted. Without warning, without declaration, and in ways that the affected parties found. It paused again. Clarifying. You're afraid of them, Dania said. Everyone is afraid of them, Shinvoris said, and for the first time in the conversation its voice carried something that might have been honesty. They moved a planet, President Osei. Not a ship. Not a station. A planet. With 10 billion people on it. While it was occupied. In 11 days. The technology required to do that sits at such a remove from anything the Union or any of its members can currently produce that it might as well be sorcery. It leaned forward slightly. No one in the Galactic Union wants to know what the Moran do when someone says no to them. And so for 4,000 years, no one has ever directly said no. Until now. Until now. Which is why, President Osei, the Union is asking Earth, politely, urgently, and with every diplomatic resource at our disposal, to be the one to say it first. Dania felt the shape of it then, the clean, terrible logic of her position. She was not just being asked to refuse. She was being asked to test a hypothesis on behalf of 17 civilizations who had too much to lose to test it themselves. What does the Union offer in return? She asked. Unambiguous support. Military presence in your system within 48 hours of any Moran action. Trade preference renegotiation to significantly favorable terms. A formal declaration of Earth's indispensable membership. What does the Union offer, Dania said, if the Moran do something that your military presence can't stop? The silence this time lasted a very long time. We offer our sincere condolences, Shinvoris said, and the assurance that Earth's sacrifice will be remembered. She met with the Moran on the 7th day. It had taken that long to establish a protocol for direct communication, not because the technology was difficult, but because no one living had ever done it before and there were no precedents to follow. The communication channel was routed through the same relay infrastructure the Moran had themselves installed during the relocation, 300 years ago, and still functioning with the unnerving perfection of something built by beings who assumed their work would last. The entity that appeared in the holographic field above the conference table was not what Dania had expected, though she could not afterward have articulated what she had expected instead. It was approximately humanoid, bilateral symmetry, upright posture, 2 visual organs, but the resemblance ended there. Its surface was not skin but something that shifted between opacity and translucency at irregular intervals, revealing what appeared to be an interior that was deeply, fundamentally wrong in the way that beautiful and incomprehensible things are wrong. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were the color of bioluminescent ocean at depth. Its voice, when it spoke, arrived in her chest before it arrived in her ears. President Osei, it said. The common tongue was perfect, unaccented, delivered with a precision that suggested either enormous effort or absolute mastery, and something about its quality suggested the latter. You have me at a disadvantage, she said. I don't know your name. I am called the Collector, it said. It is a function, not a designation. I represent the Moran interest in this matter specifically and am not a general ambassador. You understand the distinction? I understand that you were sent for one purpose. Yes. It did not sit, though there was a chair available. It stood in the way that something stands when it has been standing for a very long time. You have received our request. I have. I've also received a great deal of advice about it. She kept her voice level. I want to understand it. Before I make any decision, I want to understand why. Not the mechanism. I know what you're asking us to help with. I want to know why the Moran need it. Why the Hethasai planet? Why now? Why us? The collector was quiet for a moment. In that pause, Dania had the strange and undocumentable sensation of being assessed, not by a mind in the way that human minds assessed, but by something that operated at a different scale entirely. You are the first human leader to ask why, it said. I find that hard to believe. Your predecessors, in the century after the relocation, sent diplomatic inquiries about the debt's terms, about its scope, about its timeline. No one asked why the debt existed as it did. No one asked what the Moran needed it for. A pause. You are asking a different question. I'm asking the question that matters, Dania said. Another pause, longer. Then something happened in the collector's expression, not a shift that Dania could have described precisely, but a change in quality, like a door opening in a wall you had thought was solid. The Hethasai, it said, are going to die. The words were very quiet. Not from any external cause. Not from war or plague or ecological collapse. They are going to die because Verith 4 is going to die. Their star, Verith Primary, is in the early stages of a helium accumulation cycle that will, within 120 of your years, produce a thermal pulse event sufficient to eliminate all complex life on their world's surface. A pause. We have been watching this for 1,000 years. We are watching it now. Dania stared at the holographic figure. You want to move them, she said. Not conquer them. Save them. The Hethasai have known about the stellar instability for 60 of their years, the collector said. Their own scientists identified it. Their government has suppressed the information. Their population does not know. And when the Galactic Union commissioned a stellar survey of Verith Primary 18 years ago, the Hethasai government lobbied quietly but effectively to have the findings reclassified, not falsified, but rendered inaccessible to the general Union membership under a rarely invoked ecological sensitivity provision. Why would they suppress it? Because the Hethasai do not wish to move. The collector's voice carried something that was not quite sadness and not quite contempt, something that existed between the two, in a register that Dania did not have a word for. They believe Verith 4 is sacred. Their culture, their theology, their entire structure of meaning is rooted in the physical specificity of that world, that soil, that sky, that particular arrangement of continents. They would rather die in the place they know than live in a place they don't. You can't move a civilization against its will just because you think you know better than they do, Dania said. That's the oldest justification for. We know, the collector said. We know exactly what it looks like. We know what the history of such decisions contains. Another pause. We also know what it looks like when 4 billion beings burn. The silence in the room was profound. Why do you need Earth? Dania asked. Her voice was careful now, each word placed deliberately. If you have the technology to move planets, you don't need our help. You moved ours with no assistance from anyone. Why do you need us involved? Because we cannot do this alone, the collector said. Not for technical reasons. For political ones. A shift in its posture, or what read as posture. The Galactic Union's charter includes an emergency override provision, Article 7 Tau, that allows for the forcible relocation of a member civilization's home world in circumstances where verified extinction-level stellar events threaten the survival of said civilization, provided the relocation is authorized by a 2/3 majority of the Union Security Council. A pause. We have been trying to invoke this provision for 11 years. We have been blocked each time. The Hethasai government has significant political relationships within the Union. Their allies have voted down every attempt to even bring the stellar data before the full council. So you want us to advocate for it? From the inside. We want you to do something more specific, the collector said. We want you to take the suppressed stellar survey data, which we have acquired, and which is irrefutable, and we want you to present it to the full Union membership, bypassing the Security Council entirely, invoking the emergency disclosure provision that allows any member civilization to bring existential threat data directly before the General Assembly. It is a provision that has never been used. It will create a constitutional crisis within the Union. Several of your allies will consider it a betrayal. The political cost to Earth will be significant. And in exchange, you move the Hethasai planet. In exchange, 4 billion beings live. Dania looked at the face of the collector, the deep water eyes, the shifting surface, the vast and patient stillness of something that had been waiting for this conversation for a very long time. On the 19th day, the Secretary-General of the Galactic Union made a formal statement. It was carefully worded, diplomatically nuanced, and amounted to this: Earth should refuse the Moran. The Union would stand behind Earth. History would vindicate the courage of a young civilization that chose its allies over an ancient debt. On the 20th day, 2 of Earth's outer settlement governments, Proxima Station and the Kepler Belt Confederation, issued their own statements declaring that they would not support any action that risked Union membership, and that the Earth Presidency did not have the authority to make this decision unilaterally. On the 21st day, the Director Solis came to Dania with something she had found in the treaty archive. Something that had been there for 300 years, filed in a supplementary annex to the original agreement, in a section that had been marked as administrative boilerplate and never formally translated. It was 3 sentences in Proto-Moran. It took the translation team 6 hours to render them with any confidence, and when they did, Dania read them 4 times before she trusted what she was reading. The sentences said, "This agreement is made in full knowledge that the stellar event prompting this relocation may not be of natural origin. Should future analysis confirm artificial causation, the obligation remains in force, the debt remains valid, and the terms remain binding. The integrity of the favor is not contingent on the integrity of the emergency." Dania sat very still for a long time. Then she called Solis back into her office. "What does artificial causation mean?" she said, "in the context of a stellar event?" Solis had been a diplomat for 30 years. Her face did not move. "It means," she said, "that someone induced it. Someone induced our sun's premature helium flash. Allegedly. Possibly. According to a clause that the people who signed this treaty clearly knew about and clearly understood to be significant, given that they included it." A pause. "Someone, 300 years ago, may have accelerated our sun's instability. Made it look like a natural event that was going to kill us. And then the Moran appeared and offered to save us. And the price was exactly what we've spent 300 years being unable to pay," Dania said. "Yes. Which means the Moran may have needed this specific favor 300 years ago. May have needed it so urgently that they manufactured the conditions to create a civilization that was obligated to perform it." Solis's voice was entirely level, which was the most frightening thing about it. "Which means the Hethasai stellar event may not be natural either," Dania said. The silence between them was absolute. "Or," Solis said carefully, after a long time, "the Moran knew 4,000 years ago that Verith Primary was going to fail. They've known all along. And they've been assembling the political conditions necessary to save the Hethasai for 1,000 years. And we are the last piece." "Those are 2 very different explanations," Dania said. "Yes. One of them means we were used. Manipulated into a debt we never actually owed, by beings who needed a tool and built us to be it." "Yes. And the other means?" "The other means we were chosen," Solis said. "By beings who thought we were worth saving and thought we were worth trusting and thought that we, specifically, were the kind of civilization that would look at 4 billion people facing an extinction they don't know about and choose to do something about it, even at cost." She paused. "Those 2 interpretations of the same facts produce very different decisions." Dania stood up and walked to the window. The baobab in the courtyard below was lit by the amber light of their borrowed sun, the sun they had been given when their own was taken from them, or when their own had failed and they had been saved. She had been trying, for 21 days, to determine which version of her civilization's history was true. She was not sure, she was realizing, that she could determine it. She was not sure that anyone could. The Moran were ancient and patient, and they did not explain themselves, and they had left one clause in an annex that could be read as confession or as warning or as something else entirely, and she had 22 days. No, she corrected herself, 9 days, to decide what to do with a debt that may have been engineered and a crisis that was definitely real. "The Hethasai are dying," she said. "Yes," said Solis. "Regardless of how this started. Regardless of what the Moran did or didn't do 300 years ago. The stellar data is real. The timeline is real. 4 billion people are going to burn unless someone does something." "Yes. And the Moran have the technology to stop it, and we have the political access to create the conditions under which they're allowed to, and the favor they're calling in may or may not be a genuine debt and may or may not be something we actually owe." Yes. Dania was quiet for a while. The Valesi archdelegate told me, she said at last, that no one in 4,000 years has ever said no to the Moran. Because everyone is afraid of what happens if they do. And I've been thinking about that for 3 weeks, and I think it's the wrong thing to be afraid of. She turned from the window. I think the thing to be afraid of is what we become if we spend our entire history making every decision based on what powerful beings will do to us if we don't. That's a beautiful sentiment, Solis said. It doesn't tell me what you're going to decide. I'm going to present the stellar data to the General Assembly, Dania said. I'm going to invoke the emergency disclosure provision. I'm going to tell 4 billion Hethasai what their government has been hiding from them. And I'm going to let them decide, actually decide, with full information, whether they want to move. She paused. The Moran asked us to bypass the political process and force the relocation. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something harder. I'm going to give the Hethasai the truth and trust them to choose. Solis looked at her for a long moment. The Moran may not accept that as fulfillment of the favor, she said. No. But it's what I can do with a clear conscience. The Union will consider it a betrayal regardless. Probably. The outer settlements may declare independence over it. They might. And if the Hethasai, given full information, still choose to stay on Verith 4 and die, then we will have done what we could and they will have made their choice, Dania said. With their eyes open. Which is more than their government gave them. She picked up the data slate containing the stellar survey. Get me a session before the General Assembly. I need 3 days to prepare the presentation. I need Thessaly of the 7th Coherence to speak alongside me, if they're willing. And I need someone to draft a formal communication to the Moran ship telling them what I'm doing instead of what they asked, and why. What if they respond badly? Dania looked up at the sky through the window, where the dark shape of the Moran ship was still visible, patient and enormous, in the pale amber light. Then we find out, she said, what patient beings do when you tell them the truth about why you're not going to do exactly what they asked. She spoke to the Galactic Union General Assembly on the 26th day. 312 member civilizations, represented by delegates physical and holographic, filling the vast bowl of the Union's oldest chamber on the station at Galactic Meridian 7. The Secretary-General sat in his ceremonial seat with an expression that suggested he was watching someone make a mistake they would not survive. Thessaly of the 7th Coherence stood beside her. Dania had never given a speech that mattered more. She had spent the 3 days preparing it with the careful attention she gave to anything she cared about, reading it aloud in her office, revising it, testing each sentence for what it assumed and what it revealed, cutting everything that was there for effect rather than meaning. What remained was very simple. She presented the stellar data. She walked the assembly through the science with her science advisor's help, in language that was accessible and irrefutable. She showed them the original survey results that had been reclassified. She showed them the timeline, 120 years, possibly less. She showed them the faces of Hethasai children in cities built in the shadow of a star that was going to kill them. Then she told them about the Moran request. About the debt. About the specific favor that had been called in and about what she had chosen to do instead. She did not spare herself in the telling. She said, clearly, that she did not know if Earth's original debt was genuine. She said she did not know if the old sun had died naturally or been made to die. She said these were questions that the galaxy deserved answers to and that she was formally requesting a joint investigation. And then she said that none of this changed what was true about Verith 4. 4 billion beings are going to die, she said, into the enormous silence of the chamber, and they don't know it. They have been protected from the knowledge by a government that loved them too much to terrify them and feared the truth too much to trust them with it. I understand that impulse. I have spent 26 days being told that there is a version of this situation in which Earth keeps all its allies and maintains all its relationships and honors the comfort of everyone in this room by doing nothing. I have been told that this is the wise choice. The safe choice. The choice that will let us all go on as we have been. She paused. We have been where the Hethasai are, she said. We were a planet facing extinction and we were afraid and we signed a contract we didn't fully understand because we wanted to live. I am standing here today, 300 years later, in a borrowed solar system, with a civilization that has had 3 centuries to grow into something we are proud of, because someone decided that we were worth saving. I am not asking the Hethasai government's permission to do this. I am asking the Hethasai people, here and now, through every broadcast channel available to this chamber, to hear what I am about to say. She looked directly into the recording array. Your star is dying. You have 120 years. The Moran have the technology to move your world and have been trying to offer it for over a decade. The choice about whether to accept is yours and no one else's. I am giving you the information your government chose not to give you. What you do with it is your decision. I will honor whatever you decide." She stepped back from the podium. In the silence that followed, and it was a very long silence, Thessaly of the Seventh Coherence moved forward. It stood before the Assembly of the Galaxy, the oldest Hethasai diplomat currently serving, 400 years old, and it did not speak for a long time. When it finally spoke, it said only this: "I have waited 30 years to hear those words." The reaction was exactly what Dania had predicted and worse than she had feared. The Secretary-General issued a formal censure of Earth within 6 hours. 3 member civilizations suspended diplomatic relations. The Outer Settlement Governors on Proxima Station declared a referendum on Earth governance membership that would, polls suggested, fail narrowly, but only narrowly. Shanvoris of the Valesi Concordance sent a personal message to Solis that said, in its elegant and precise common tongue, that Earth had just made itself the most controversial planet in the known galaxy, and that this was not entirely a negative development, but that it was certainly a complicated one. The Hethasai government issued a statement of furious denial. Then, within 48 hours, as the broadcast reached Verith 4 and the Hethasai people began to respond, the government issued a second statement that was notably less furious and considerably more frightened. Within 4 days, the Hethasai parliament had voted to convene a special emergency session. Within 6 days, the first independent Hethasai scientists were confirming the data publicly. Within 8 days, the first organized public movement in favor of relocation had formed on Verith 4's largest continent. It would take years, possibly decades. The theological and cultural resistance was real and deep and would not resolve easily. Thessaly had been right about that. But the conversation was happening now, with full information, in the open, and Dania had learned enough about the history of difficult decisions to know that full information and open conversation were the only conditions under which any genuine choice could be made. On the 29th day, the collector contacted her again. "You did not do what we asked," it said. "No," she said. "I did what I could do." "Which is different." The favor was specific. "The favor," Dania said carefully, "asked us to bypass the Hethasai people's ability to decide their own future. I wasn't willing to do that. If that means the debt is uncollected, I'll live with the consequences." The collector was quiet for a long time. "You understand," it said at last, "that the clause you found, the annex, was meant to be found. It was placed there by the original Moran architects of this agreement specifically so that a future human leader, one who read carefully, would find it and understand that the debt's legitimacy was not guaranteed." Dania looked at it steadily. "I thought it might be. We needed you to know that you had a choice. A real one. Not between 2 forms of compliance, but between compliance and refusal. The favor only has value if the civilization performing it chooses to do so from genuine moral decision rather than from obligation." A pause. Compelled sacrifice achieves nothing. Chosen sacrifice changes things. Then why frame it as a debt at all? Because chosen sacrifice requires a structure in which the choice feels real and the cost feels real. A favor asked of a friend is easy to decline. A debt 3 centuries old, called in by beings with technology beyond your comprehension, with the eyes of the galaxy watching, that creates conditions in which the difficulty of the choice matches the importance of it. Dania felt something settle in her chest, not resolution exactly, but something adjacent to it. The shape of a thing understood. "You needed us to be willing to do the difficult thing even when we didn't have to," she said. "We needed to know whether the civilization we saved was the kind of civilization worth asking. The favor was the test, not the transaction." A pause. "And you, in not doing exactly what we asked but in doing what the situation actually required, you have answered the question more definitively than compliance would have." "You're telling me," Dania said slowly, "that if I had agreed to do exactly what you asked, bypass the assembly, force the relocation, you would have been disappointed." "We would have been unsurprised," the collector said. "Compliance under threat is the most common response in the galaxy. It tells us nothing we didn't already know. What you did instead, giving the Hethasai their information and their choice, accepting the political cost, refusing to make the decision for them while still making certain the decision could be made, something moved in its expression that Dania was beginning to recognize as the nearest the collector came to warmth. "We have been watching civilizations for 4,000 years. We have moved 12 planets. We have never seen that before." "I'm not sure I did it correctly," Dania said. "Correct," said the collector, is a category error when applied to things like this. There is only what you do and what it reveals about who you are. It moved slightly, a shift in posture that might have been a bow, or a conclusion, or a form of farewell that humans simply did not have the context to read. The Hethasai will take time. The political costs will take time. But the conversation is happening. The 4 billion are deciding for themselves. In 120 years, a civilization will live that would otherwise have burned, and they will know, if anyone records the history accurately, that a human president decided their lives were worth a political crisis. A pause. The Moran consider the debt resolved. Even though I didn't do what you asked. You did what the situation asked. Which was harder and therefore more. The debt is resolved. The holographic field went dark. Dania sat alone in the conference room for a while, looking at the space where the collector had been. Then she looked up, through the transparent ceiling panel above her, at the sky where the dark Moran ship still hung. As she watched, it moved. Slowly at first, and then with gathering speed, it turned against the amber light of Kepler 442 and began to diminish, growing smaller and smaller until it was a point and then less than a point, until it was gone entirely into the deep and patient dark between the stars. The immediate aftermath was, as predicted, extraordinarily difficult. The Union censure held for 2 years before the political calculus shifted enough for it to be quietly downgraded. The Proxima referendum failed, as the polls had suggested, but by a margin that told Dania exactly how much work remained. The Valesi Concordance maintained reduced diplomatic relations for 18 months before Shanvoris, in a private communication, indicated that the reduction had always been somewhat performative and that normalization could be expected. The Hethasai parliamentary debate lasted 3 years, was broadcast across their entire civilization, and was the most watched political proceeding in Galactic Union history by a factor of 11. The theological arguments were fierce and sincere and unresolvable by any single vote, which is why the eventual resolution did not attempt resolution. Instead, it established a voluntary relocation framework, in which any Hethasai family could choose to be moved to a new world the Moran had already prepared, while those who chose to remain on Verith 4 were supported in doing so. And the ongoing conversation about what Hethasai identity meant in a universe where survival required change was built into the framework itself, recognized as permanent and necessary rather than a problem to be solved. In the first decade, 30 million Hethasai relocated. In the second, 400 million more. The numbers grew slowly and then faster, as the new world became real to people who had only imagined it, as the first children born on the new world grew up and demonstrated that Hethasai identity did not require Veritha's specific sky. The theological debates did not end. The pain did not end. But the 4 billion continued to exist, in a universe that had decided their existence was worth the trouble of complexity. Dania served one more term as president, because she had work to finish, and also, she admitted privately, because leaving would have felt like abandoning the people who had trusted her decision. She then stepped back into law, specifically into the newly forming field of interspecies debt arbitration, a field that had been essentially non-existent before the Moran case and was now, rather suddenly, urgently necessary. She was working in that field the day the final report from the Joint Stellar Investigation was released. The report was 400 pages long and written in 6 languages. Its conclusion, stated with the careful precision of scientists who understood exactly how significant it was as follows. The premature helium flash event that had threatened Earth's original sun 307 years ago showed evidence of external stimulation at the quantum mechanical level, consistent with applied Moran technology, inconsistent with natural stellar variation, and impossible to attribute definitively to any party at this remove in time. In other words, possibly deliberate. Possibly not. Genuinely, irresolvably uncertain. Dania read the report on a Tuesday morning in her office in New Accra, with the amber light of Kepler 442 coming through the window and the old baobab casting its shadow across the courtyard below. She read it to the end. Then she set it down and thought about it for a long time. What she thought was this: it doesn't matter. Not because the truth didn't matter. It did. It always would. The investigation would continue. The question would remain open for as long as civilization existed to ask it. But the answer, whether the old sun had been pushed or had simply fallen, did not change what had been built in the 300 years since. It did not change the 10 billion people who had stood on the surface of a moving planet and watched a new sky open above them. It did not change the children born in the amber light who had never known any other home and loved it with the fierce simplicity of the unlost. It did not change the 4 billion Hethasai who were, right now, learning to grow things in new soil and finding, with a surprise that only the genuinely displaced ever find, that home was not a place they had left behind but a quality they had carried. It did not change what humanity was, or what they had chosen to become. She put on her coat and went outside. The morning was warm and the baobab was, as always, enormous and ancient and steady, its roots doing their slow and invisible work in the dark beneath the stones. She stood in its shade for a while, looking up through the branches at the amber sky. The debt was resolved. The question remained. The work continued. She walked back inside and got on with it. 3 months later, a young Hethasai scholar named Verith of the Second Coherence, barely into her second life phase, young by Hethasai standards, old by any other, published a paper that became one of the most widely read texts in the Galactic Union for the next 50 years. Its title, in common tongue translation, was, On Gratitude to Those Who Gave Us the Choice We Would Not Have Given Ourselves. Its final paragraph read, in Solis's translation, which Dania kept on her desk until she died, the greatest gift one civilization can give another is not salvation. Salvation can be imposed, and imposed salvation is a form of conquest. The greatest gift is the truth, delivered in time, with the grace to step back and let the receiver decide what to do with it. We were given that gift. We are still learning what to do with it. We will spend the next 100 years learning. And at the end of those 100 years, when Verith Primary finally burns and the sky above our old world goes white with the fire that would have taken us, we will be elsewhere, alive, looking at a different sun. And we will remember that someone looked at the cost of giving us that choice and decided the cost was worth it. We owe them nothing. We owe them everything. Both of these things are true. Dania read it on a Thursday afternoon and sat quietly with it for a long time. Then she opened her window to let in the amber light and the sound of the city below, the city of the living, the city of the saved, the city of the ones who had been given a new sun and 300 years to decide what kind of people to be in its light. They were still deciding. That, she thought, was the point. That had always been the point. This story was brought to you by HSY Stories. Subscribe to our channel and be the first to experience every new story.